stone tool working would be essential to everyday life.
Okay.
All of your tools, your axes, your hide scrapers, your knives, your arrowheads would be made out of stone. People would have a really good understanding of that right away because everyone around them's doing it all the time.
Cool. Well, I'm Tiffany. I work here at Knifewear. It's really
nice to meet you, Tiffany. I'm Dale.
Thanks for
coming.
I work
outside.
Nice. Working outside is great. I'm curious about what Alberta's history might be involved in this kind of stuff and how you come by the knowledge.
Yeah, so people in Alberta, Indigenous folks in Alberta, have been making stone tools since time immemorial. So actually I did my master's thesis on a Blackfoot bison kill near Brooks, Alberta. And what was cool about that was there were stones from all over the Great Plains area. And so arrowheads were made at this site that were brought from Montana, from North Dakota. So the Blackfoot people at this site had a really good understanding of where stones came from. They would be expert geologists in that time.
So neat.
Yeah.
How did you become interested in this?
Yeah, so I wanted to become an archaeologist, and the first archaeological site that I worked on was just a smattering of the byproduct of making stone tools. So it was just the flakes. So if you look at this stone here, you can see it has some scars, and these are flake scars. Now a large flake, I don't have one right here. Actually I do. It's a different type of raw material, but a flake would be removed from a core like this. This is petrified wood, this is obsidian, and then that would be worked. But this site that I was working on was just covered in flakes like this. And I became so interested in how people made stone tools right away. I just had to know. So I asked my professor at the time, and he said, you know, there's not a lot of people around who are doing this right now, at least not in Alberta. So it was all YouTube for a couple of years, and a lot of broken rocks, and a lot of really nothing that looked like anything functional for probably a year and a half before I kind of got the hang of it. And then since then, it's just been an exciting journey of learning more and more and more about it.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And have you worked with any folks, like knowledge keepers with Indigenous communities around Alberta that do still have this knowledge, or? So
I've talked to a lot of elders about this, because at a lot of times when I'm working on an archaeological site, we'll have Indigenous community members there monitoring. So we have lots of great conversation. I have not yet met somebody in Alberta that's Indigenous that still carries this knowledge, but I did work with a student from up north, and he was a language expert, so he was understanding all different languages, and he came and I taught him how to make some stone tools, and then he went and he started asking like the elders in his community for like words for like Flintknapping, and he couldn't really find anything. I know it's out there somewhere. I know there's someone that still carries some of this knowledge, but yeah, since colonial expansion, Indigenous folks started using metal to make arrowheads and stuff like that. So, and it was much more efficient than doing with stone. So this kind of got lost a few hundred years ago in Alberta, but it's coming back. Well, coming back big time, because that's what we're doing this afternoon. And I'm very excited about it. So here's your cobble. So in this book series you're reading, they would be using flint. So this is probably happening over in the UK somewhere, or in Europe. But we have a nodule here of obsidian. And you can start the process by using a stone. Here I have a quartzite cobble. Quartzite is very common in Alberta. If it's a nice enough material, you can actually use it to flint knap. But then you would use stone to strike flakes away, or you could use what I have here is a piece of whitetail antler. We call this soft hammer percussion. So it's not going to crush as much as if you would use stone to draw off a flake. And then later in the process, when you've worked your cobble down into something that's getting kind of in the direction you want it to be, you're going to be using pressure flaking. And this is just a deer antler tine. And instead of using percussive force to draw flakes away from the stone, you use pressure. So you load up pressure into the stone, and then when you feel like you have enough pressure, then you flake it in. Now I'd be wearing leather on my hand because I don't want obsidian shards in my flesh. But that's kind of the idea. And this is for the more fine work, the pressure flaking. It's the same thing you would be doing in this case when you're working a little projectile point. So this would be the equivalent to like an lattice dart, so a spear throwing dart.
Cool. Do you find obsidian around here?
You do not.
I
In
think so.
archaeological sites, though,
Yeah.
you do find it. So
Because
this
trade and things.
exactly, yeah. So this Blackfoot site I was mentioning that I did my master's thesis on, there was some obsidian in the archaeological assemblage there, and that was from Idaho. So people
Oh, cool.
either traded or traveled and brought that up. But we do find obsidian in Alberta, but only in archaeological sites.
Okay.
Only in cases where people in the past would have brought it here.
So if you find obsidian on a hike in the mountains or something like that, you should probably say something.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Reach out to the Archaeological Survey of Alberta.
Okay.
We'll plug them.
All right. So obsidian is not found in Alberta unless it is in an archaeological site. As you say, what do you find in Alberta?
So there's a lot of stones in Alberta that you can use to flint knap. One of the most common ones is quartzite. Now, I was mentioning this earlier, this hammerstone is quartzite. Here's what a flake of quartzite looks like. This stuff I've cooked underneath a hearth because it makes it easier to chip. Now, you can find quartzite in Alberta. We also have a lot of petrified wood. So this is actually fossilized wood. And if you turn it over, you can kind of see how the tree rings are laminating on either side of it.
Really cool.
Yeah, but this stuff people would work into arrowheads in Alberta. Sometimes you can find some of the most beautiful arrowheads made out of this stuff because of all the tree ring banding in it. Another stone that's found in archaeological sites in Alberta, but is not from Alberta, is this stone here, which is called Knife River Flint.
Okay.
And this comes from North Dakota. And there are certain periods in Alberta's history where this stuff was heavily utilized in Alberta. So people would have traded or transported this stuff up from North Dakota. And they did this because it's such a fantastic tool stone. It chips easily like obsidian, but it retains its edge. Obsidian is very brittle,
Cool.
so I wouldn't recommend using obsidian of a lot of your culinary things because you don't want little chips of obsidian down your throat. Knife River Flint, though, holds its edge, so it's less likely to break off in your food. Another type of stone we find in archaeological sites here in Alberta is this stuff, which I'm just calling it generically Montana chert, but there's chert that comes from the Madison Formation in Montana. And it's usually an orange color like this, sometimes it's red, and this is another stone that people traded and transported up from Montana to use. That being said, there are a number of other stones in Alberta you can use to make stone tools. Simply, they just have to fracture conchoidally, and so that's what this is here. This is a conchoidal fracture.
Which is a shape like this.
Yeah, it's like a conchoidal fracture goes after the term conch shell, because the way that shells kind of ripple out, you see that in these flakes. So this is a flake scar and it kind of ripples out, so it resembles a shell in a way. So if a stone flakes that way, then it's usable for making stone tools.
Cool.
Because when it flakes that way, it means that it's predictable. And so obsidian is such a great stone for that because it usually doesn't have any inclusions that get in the way of that conchoidal fracture.
What's the best type of rock to use for tool making? And I guess in addition to that question, like I always think about tool making and, you know, in my head have imagined like one type of rock being used for all uses. And now that you're talking about this and I see this display in front of me, I think that that idea is kind of dumb because obviously you would use several different types of rock, just like in my kitchen I use several different types of knife. You know, I'm not using the same steel for my axe as I am using for, you know, my very fine kitchen knife. So is there, of the three types of rock, a superior rock to use? I'm gonna guess not sedimentary.
Well, this,
but I might be super
This
wrong.
is sedimentary.
Oh, wow.
This is igneous.
Okay.
So obsidian is essentially volcanic glass. It's cooled lava. Igneous means of fire, and so obsidian is the classic case or igneous example. This Madison chert forms within limestone, which is sedimentary. It's the bottom of the ocean, usually is where that forms. And chert will form nodules in limestone, and it's usually related to very silica-rich creatures in the past that get all compacted together. and they create these chert or flint nodules. Flint is formed in a similar way.
Right. And Alberta had a huge inland sea.
It did, yeah.
So we would have appropriate.
Not as much as we would like, I don't think. It really depends on how that
Right.
sea is fossilizing,
Okay.
or the leftovers of that sea is fossilizing, yeah. So yeah, we have igneous here, we have sedimentary, and quartzite is a metamorphic. It's kind of in
Right.
between. So what you're looking for is for stone to chip in a certain way.
Okay.
So more than the type of stone, you're looking for how much silica content is in it. So if it's
Okay.
being silicified, if it's getting like petrified wood that's petrified in such a way that it's just filling with really fine-grained silica, that will work well for chipping. But if it's fossilized in such a way that it's not getting all that silica in it, then it won't be good for making
Okay.
stone tools. So it simply has to do with how it forms.
You brought a lot of stuff. And, you know, I was told that I get to make stuff this afternoon.
You sure do, yes.
What are we making stuff out of?
Well, I figured we could make some stuff out of obsidian, but I also brought some jasper, which is kind of a fun stone to work because it'll
Cool.
reveal all sorts of pretty colors.
Yeah.
So we'll work a little bit of obsidian and a little bit of jasper.
Awesome.
So a little igneous stone and a little metamorphic sedimentary somewhere in the middle there. So,
There you go, rock nerds.
yes.
We're using it all.
Want to break some rocks?
Yeah, let's break some rocks. What do we got going on
Okay,
here?
so I've got a few different types of stone. So we've got obsidian.
Yeah.
This is a jasper. I don't know where the jasper from. I got it at a discount from a rock shop, but it's a beautiful red jasper. And then we have Brazilian agate here, which is this.
Agate's
Very
so
pretty
cool. Like it's, I don't know. I just like how milky it is and
It's
how you
neat.
put layers in it. Yeah, it's neat.
And actually, Brazilian agate does not work well for flint knapping unless you cook it. It's
Right,
just
okay.
too hard, and it usually crushes like this. So this would have been a flake
okay,
that
yeah.
I tried to drive off before I cooked it.
Yeah.
And you can see it's all kind of coarse and opaque, whereas here it's got that nice glossy sheen.
That's so neat.
Yeah. I cooked this to about 200 degrees, and now what I do with it is I put it in a sand bath inside a turkey roaster. It's just easy for me to do it that way. But in the past, people would have cooked it under their fire pit probably,
Yeah.
and they would have let it get slowly hot, because if you cook the stone too fast, and it'll explode if
Yeah.
there's too much water in it. So they would cook this under the hearth. And different stones react to different temperatures, but what this does when you cook it is it's easier to flake. So when I'll just flake the stone here, this sort of process is much easier when it's been cooked. And when you cook it too, you'll usually have a glossy luster on it.
Right.
And then cooking it will also help the stone, when you flake it, to propagate through inclusions in it. So here you can see some quartz inclusions. And if this stone wasn't heated, it'd probably kind of break around that quartz inclusion. Whereas now that it's cooked, it goes right through.
You just take a guess at how long it takes to.
Yeah, you
I
just
mean,
got to
you don't have a
experiment
meat
with the
thermometer,
stone.
right? So
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
have to go for it. Okay.
Well, I use a meat thermometer in my hearth, but people
Yes.
then, would have had to just figure out
Yeah.
how to get the right temperature.
There you go.
But yeah, this is very sharp, a fresh flake of that. So you could do all sorts of cutting with just a simple
Rad.
flake like
You
that.
totally could.
And then this axe says you could cut things with that, and then you could further work that down into an arrowhead.
I'm really fangirling now because this is the coolest thing that has really ever happened in my office.
Great. Well, you get to break some rocks now, if you
So
like.
sweet.
So what I have here is a series of tools. We have stones for hard hammer percussion. Usually this is what you're using to get a larger piece off the core. So there's a couple hammer stones here. And then after that, we've got these antler billets. So this is elk, and this is whitetail. And then these are simply my modern tools that emulate this. So I'm using copper, and then inside the copper is lead to give it weight. And this is just my modern version of that. And I do like copper because it tends to stick to the stone, and it's more predictable in my opinion than antler. And then here for the later stages of pressure flaking, you can use a deer antler, and then here's just my copper version of the deer antler.
Cool.
So I'll show you how to use these tools. But to start, I'll give you this stone, or let's see what's going to be the, we'll go with this one.
Okay.
So this jasper, and then this hammerstone.
Okay.
And then what we want to do is, so basically we're peeling away layers, so we can use those layers like the flakes for cutting or whatever. And then sometimes you have a vision of what's in the center. Perhaps you want to make like something like this, like a bifaces in the center of the stone.
Right.
So more than just breaking rocks, it's like peeling a potato.
Okay.
You want to get rid of the stuff around the outside because what you want to make is kind of in the center.
Okay.
But sometimes the stuff around the outside is what you want to make. So all depends on what you're trying to do. Now, before you strike the stone, if there's a pretty brittle edge, you want to grind it. So what I'm doing here is I'm just getting rid of some of the fragile bits that will just crush when I strike it, because I don't want it to crush. I want the force to go through and detach a flake. So just grinding that, and then I'm going to give you this to you, and then basically with your stone there, you just want to kind of hit it here.
Okay.
See what happens.
All right.
Smash it on the cool line, see what happens.
Okay. So just like whack it.
So your angle too will determine how that flake is going to detach. So if you're holding it upright like this, the flake's going to terminate right about here.
Okay.
But if you change the angle more like this and come at it like that,
it'll be longer.
It'll be longer.
Okay, here we go. I'm gonna move that little finger of mine.
Yeah.
Whoa! Missed completely.
But you did somehow knock a flake off the other side.
I did.
So what you want to do too is just give it a gentle, so here I'll show you how I'm going to do it here. I'll use this as my platform.
Okay.
So the same area will be your platform this time.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to hit it. I'm going to let it fall. I'm going to use the weight of the stone.
Okay. And there you go. Good.
So you don't have to hit it so hard. You don't have to use your arm. You just let the stone kind of do the work for you.
Okay.
So change your angle. It's almost there. Just change your angle a little bit like that.
And then I'm aiming right here?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm terrible at this, Dale.
It's okay. It's in your genes. Everyone's ancestors did this at one point in time. There it is.
There it is.
There you go.
Look at that.
So there's a perfect flake.
Oh, wow, it's so pretty, actually. Mm-hmm. You weren't wrong about revealing the cool colors.
Yeah, see this? There's a quartz bug in here, which is essentially just a little pocket of quartz.
Yeah, wow.
So once you get your flake off, you can remove some of those really brittle edges. So I'm just going to grind around the outside really quick here. Now, a fresh flake has a great cutting edge, but if you want a bit more of a durable cutting edge, something that lasts longer, something you can saw with, here I'll use this deer antler. I'll create a serrated edge. So I'll draw flakes off from either side of the stone and work kind of along the edge so that I then have a serrated edge that gives me a stronger cutting surface. So here I'm just loading pressure into the stone, and then when I feel like I have enough pressure in there, then I pop in towards my hand and detach a flake that way. So I'm just drawing off little tiny flakes, and I'll keep turning the stone to get that serrated edge. So draw off a little flake, grind it a little bit, turn it over, push off a couple more flakes. And you kind of go about this in a little bit of a systematic process. And then before you know it, you have a nice little cutting tool. So in a lot of archaeological sites, you find flakes, and we call them utilized flakes or retouched flakes. And they would look just like this, where someone was just trying to create a decent cutting edge. How about let's crack open this piece of obsidian just to show how sharp this stuff gets. Now, a fresh flake of obsidian is the sharpest natural raw material that there is, sharper than surgical steel. So here we go. So this will cut right through.
Yep. Wow.
So this is the kind of stone you need to do chip stone tool manufacture. It needs to fracture in this predictable way. And we call it a conchoid fracture because it resembles a shell. You can see the ripples there.
Yeah.
And it's that predictability that allows a stone worker to kind of work around this whole piece and create whatever shape they want, really. And then flakes like this can further be worked into little arrowheads or...
Obsidian, do you have to cook it?
You do not. It's got cooked sufficiently in the volcano that it came from. But I've heard of
That
some
was
people
my
doing
guess,
it.
but-
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Isn't that crazy sharp? Here, we'll knock a flake of
Oh,
this
man.
agate off too and see how sharp it is in comparison to the
Yeah.
obsidian. Well, it doesn't do exactly what I want it to do because it's got all this cortex on the outside. So this is going to cause the flakes to do different things than what I want them to do. So it's got a bit of a matte finish on the inside here, which means this could be cooked a little more to get this glossy sheen that I have on this side. So you see this got a sharp edge too, but it's not nearly as sharp as obsidian.
I'm just destroying this hide that you lent me. I changed my glove. We just got these Knifewear cut gloves in.
Let's test the gloves out with the
With my
obsidian.
hand in it.
Believe it or not, I don't really use a glove anymore. If I'm working obsidian, I use gloves because it's just too brittle, but most other stone, I don't want to use a glove because it inhibits the way that my hand works.
Right, like it gets in the way of how you feel.
Exactly. And our hands literally evolved alongside stone tool technology.
Right.
So they're made for it, essentially. Just getting rid of all the loose bits there. Okay, and then you're gonna kind of hold it in your hand, or you could even hold it on your leg,
Okay.
like this, if that's easier. And then with a bit of an angle, so it's not sitting quite flat, it's kind of tipped up towards me a little bit. And then you wanna just, I like to put my finger on the billet because it kind of guides it.
Right in here, right?
Yeah. And so you're peeling away from the edge is the idea. So
Okay, so I'm gonna,
change the angle a little bit, tip it down a little further. Yeah.
so I'm gonna hit right there.
Yeah.
Right?
Good.
Woo!
There you go. You just
Wow.
created an X-Acto knife
I did indeed.
1 second.
Yeah. That is so cool how it ripples out like that.
Isn't that neat?
Yeah.
The stone essentially becomes liquid for that microsecond, and that's why you're getting those ripples. Same as if you drop a pebble into a
Interesting.
pool of water. Now there's a type of stone tool working where you have a core kind of like this, and then it's semicircular, and then the idea is to draw flakes off all the way around the edge and keep doing that. And what you start getting is flakes that are longer than they are wide and super thin and blade-like. And people in the past would make composite tools, so they'd take like a bone spear perhaps and then put little blades
okay.
into the end. And then as those shatter, you can just re-socket them.
Replace them, yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
so let's see if we can turn this into a blade core.
Blade core sounds like a kind of metal, like a band.
Yeah, blade core. So here's a blade. So it's very thin and long, and that could be used to insert into a composite type tool. Some people are so good at this that they can just keep creating them all the way around the outside
Right.
of the core. Some archaeologists like to put the flakes back together to try and find the negative image of what was made,
That is neat.
which is pretty cool. So this is we just call it a biface because it's been worked on both sides. Now, to get a biface this big and this thin is pretty tricky. First of all, you have to have a big enough raw material or piece of raw material that you don't break into a million pieces. But then to keep it long, wide, and thin requires a great deal of care when you're working it, because at this stage, it's pretty easy to snap this in half. Because as we saw earlier, obsidian's quite brittle. But if I want to thin it further, I have to strike it pretty good right on the edge so that I can draw off a nice flake in here. But if I hit it at the wrong angle or with too much force, that's it. This is done for. I've broken it in half or something. So I'm pretty happy with this piece because it's long and it's wide, and I could work this further into a knife blade or into a spear point or something. So yeah, I'm proud of this because of its size and shape, and it hasn't broken yet. So
I have noticed that in the pieces that I've flaked off, this is not one that I flaked off. I'm not this skilled yet. So they're often like rounded on one side and, you know, convex and
That's
concave.
right.
And so a biface, like, is all stone like this? Does it usually flake off with one side convex and the other concave?
yes, usually, so a flake actually, you can tell that humans had something to do with it because of its properties. So every stone flake will have the same properties. Even though these look very different, both of them have a bulb of percussion. So there's a thicker portion here on the end, which is where it was struck. And they have a ventral surface and a dorsal surface. So the ventral surface is that side you were talking about where it curves, and there's no flake scars on it.
Right.
It's all smooth. And so that's the side of the stone that was detached from the rock. The dorsal surface will have ridges and flake scars. And if you think dorsal, like dorsal fin, like on a shark or a dolphin or something, has that fin. And you can see all the flake scars from where the flakes were previously drawn off. So when you find an archaeological site, you can tell that humans had something to do with based on those properties, because you don't get rocks breaking like this naturally.
Right.
Unless a rock's bouncing down a cliff at a particular
exact right
yeah,
angle.
which that's not going to happen. In some places, you would find stone tools that like are a huge biface that's very thin, which shows like a great deal of skill in that stone tool maker. And in the Maya world, so in Central America, you find some unbelievable things that started out as bifaces, and they're very huge, and then they work these intricately and like put faces into them and all sorts of things.
Oh wow.
So that's the real goal, is to start making flint eccentrics like the Maya did. So yeah, but also you'll notice a sound to this too. Like there's a sound to it, and I've heard of some stone tools in the past. They're very large and prismatic, and some people think that they had something to do with music because the sound that it makes, and they were far too large for any functional purpose. But the sound that they made, you know, might have something to do with why they were made like that. So. That's how you know it's the right kind of stone for making stone tools, if it clinks like that. Yeah. And also there's a sound when you cleave the stone, you can tell whether it's broken in the way that you want it to, because it kind of has like a sound to it. I'll see if I can make that happen. Sometimes when I teach students how to do this, you just hear this sound all across the room. And you have to just be like, okay, we got to stop now, because that's not the sound we want to hear. This sound means you're hitting too much stone. You're trying to break through too thick of a stone. This is the sound you want to hear. Wait, not that one, this one.
There you go.
And there's your flake. There's your scar.
How did you get into smashing rocks?
So it was something just like we see here. It was an archaeological site that I was working on in 2016, I think. And I was just so fascinated about the stone chips on the ground. And I had to know how they did it and how you made whatever shape you wanted from just a stone that you find. So yeah, I was studying a site that an archaeological site that we've just made here that really did it for me. So something that's far more exciting to me than what I can make out of the stone is the knowledge of how to chip stone and to make whatever you want out of stone,
Right.
along with the knowledge of the heat treating the stone, what kinds of stone that works for it. And all these things, I imagine, in the past would have been handed down from generation to generation, and that knowledge would have been shared and expanded upon. So that skill set, I feel like, it's very much like knowing how to play a certain type of instrument. You got that, and no matter where you go in the world, you can utilize those skills.
What brought you to terroir?
Well, I was invited to Terroir. I had a connection with a butcher in Edmonton, Elise Chatterton, and she actually did a project with her and a student friend of hers once where they wanted to cut apart a deer with some stone tools. So that was actually the first time I ever made stone tools for actual butchery.
Yeah.
And then her connection to terroir just ended up connecting me, and I was honored to be invited out there. And
That is very cool.
yeah,
So is that what you did last year? You made butchering tools to cut apart?
I did. Yeah, made some knives and
Sweet.
some different flakes and whatnot, and gave them to the butchers at Terroir, and they tried them out on the Yelp.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming. And
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, letting me geek out here is the joy of my entire, at least, week. So, yeah,
Well, we'll get
thanks.
you'll be a flint napper before you know it.
I'm gonna be.
Yeah.
So if you've got any questions for Dale, just pop them in the comments. And if you don't, we'll see you next week for another scintillating cutting video of some variety.